Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And the name of your Substack is?
All Rise News, based on a phrase that I have heard thousands of times in my career from court officers and a couple of other meetings that we can talk about.
Exactly. What judges and their bailiffs say when you join the fight. So I got to know Adam during the Trump prosecution years, which seems like ancient history. But he is, as I said, a fine court reporter and legal reporter. We have almost 1,000 people already, Adam. That's how quickly people gather. Let me share one piece of news which some of you may have heard, which is not the main legal news, but you have probably heard that the National Security Advisor, Michael Waltz, was sent away. He was sent to the UN, which is kind of purgatory, particularly for Republicans, since they think the United Nations is useless. And they have sent him off. We all suspect, I think, know, because of the Signalgate scandal. He and his deputy are out. Marco Rubio is the temporary national security advisor. It's happened before, but not since the 1970s when Henry Kissinger held both roles. Not a great president, by the way. We don't know if that's going to be filled, but why is Pete Hegseth still there? Well, we'll continue to follow the story. But I want to get down to really one of the most remarkable cases we have yet had in the immigration realm. You folks who are following know that I have been focused on the Vermont case in which a Columbia student, Mohsen Badawi, was in for his naturalization, his citizenship test, was arrested because of his views, because of what he had been saying, and because of his protests on behalf of the Palestinians. No arrest, no criminality. Well, we have a case to even top that out of Texas, of all places. Adam, tell us what the case in Texas is about and the really extraordinary ruling where we finally got to the merits of the Alien Enemies Act.
Well, it is an extraordinary case, Jen. It's a case that among the constellation of cases that followed the Supreme Court's ruling in the Alien Enemies Act case, that instead of all being in front of Judge Boasberg, and that case is still going on into a probable cause of contempt, but we can return to that later, it's now happening all across the country, in New York, in Texas, and in Colorado. And the first big shot across the bow comes from Texas, from a Trump appointee who
Yes.
found that the Alien Enemies Act proclamation was illegal. Now, to just set the stage for people, the Alien Enemies Act has been used 3 times in U.S. history. It's a wartime statute, and it was invoked before the War of 1812, World War I, and World War II. And Trump had invoked it allegedly against Tren de Aragua, a Venezuelan gang. And in order to invoke the Alien Enemies Act, there needs to be a declared war. There's no declared war against Venezuela, or let alone a Venezuelan gang, or a predatory incursion, or an invasion. Now, a judge appointed by Trump had looked at the case, and this is the first judge to actually reach the finding that the invocation of this act, the entire legal architecture of why the Trump administration justifies whisking people off the street on a plane to a Salvadoran prison that is described by one judge as the most dangerous prison in the Western Hemisphere, that all stems from this Alien Enemies Act finding that was demolished today by a federal judge.
And what I love is he first addressed their argument that this is a political question, meaning you can't even look at it, Judge. This is what, in various guises, the Trump people have been doing. They have invoked state secrets at some point, political question. You can't double check the president on national security. This judge said bunk, and he went right to the merits. Excuse me, I'm so excited. I can hardly. Now, one of his findings was this gang is not a nation and we're not at war with it. Tell us a little bit about the opinion, Adam.
So that's a very important point. Now, the Trump administration's position is that TDA, for short, is a quasi state actor, essentially an arm of the Venezuelan government. Now, judges are grappling with that because they know that this is going to be under review. They know that appellate courts are going to look into it. So they're not going to, they're crossing every T, dotting every I, and they're saying, okay, well, let's take this quasi state actor argument. This is a judge that dismissed it out of hand. Now, I'm chatting with you from New York. I'm about 10 blocks away from the courts there, and I saw another case in the same constellation of cases in front of another federal judge, Judge Hellerstein, who's also deeply skeptical of it. This is the same judge. Some of the viewers might have seen those headlines saying that he called it an inquisition like in the medieval ages. And so, and he also compared it to a secret court. Judges aren't having this. They're
Right.
taking, yeah, they're taking their time. And, as we all talk about the 100 days, let's talk about that extraordinary statistic. The Times has been keeping tabs. 100 days, 123 as of yesterday, 123 rulings, at least temporarily blocking the Trump administration's initiatives.
And what is so fascinating is the Trump administration wanted to get these cases out of DC, make people file the so-called habeas corpus cases, meaning send me the body, all over the country, wherever the people were held. And you know what? It's backfiring because what we're getting now is a whole array of judges. He can't claim it's just a Democratic judge or it's just DC judges. You're seeing them across the board weigh in and say, no, this is not a nation, and they're not being directed by Venezuela. You cannot use this. And like the other judges that have weighed in on this, he was rather, shall we say, dismissive of the government's arguments. And that's the other thing to keep an eye on. These prosecutors who go in there are so ill-prepared to respond that judges are understandably getting frustrated with them. And they basically gave them the back of the hand. We're done with this. Now, it's going to go up to the Fifth Circuit. We know that. We don't know what the Fifth Circuit is going to do. As all of you know who have been following along, the Fifth Circuit's one of the worst. It's Steve Vladeck, our good friend's, the bane of his existence, and their existence, actually. But they are going to rule on it, and maybe we'll get back to the Supreme Court. But we finally got a ruling, and it comes from a Trump-appointed judge. This is big news, people. And we're going to see if Adam and I are correct that we are seeing the assertion of that Article 3 against Article 2 against the president. I think we're going to see more of this again and again and again. Now, when it rains, it pours for the Trump administration. So we want to shift gears to the other story, I think, that may have slipped under the radar of some people who don't get their news at reputable sites like ours. They may rely on cable news. How silly. What we had today, Ed Martin. You've heard me speak about it. You've heard many of our guests. Ed Martin is the appointee with no prosecutorial experience whatsoever, who has been nominated for the DC U.S. Attorney. Incredibly important because that's where so many important cases are filed. He has a record that is really, even the Republicans cannot defend it. First of all, no experience. Second of all, 150 appearances on RT, the Russian propaganda network, has cozied up to anti-Semites. Then he has lied about it. He has sent threatening, abusive letters to members of Congress, as well as Wikipedia and also medical journals. And what happened today, Adam? Oop, there was going to be a vote, maybe have a hearing, not have a hearing, and Republicans took it off the calendar. What does that mean?
Well, it certainly doesn't mean a vote of confidence. And I'll say one thing about Ed Martin. It's very interesting that Donald Trump placed him in the District of DC because that is a place every single judge in the District of DC has seen the January 6th docket. Every single judge in the District of DC has seen the videos of the assaults on police officers at the Capitol on January 6th. Every single judge has a reason to strongly question the credibility of Ed Martin. And I'll tell you what, they are doing it already. There was a report of Ed Martin trying to seek a warrant to seize the assets of an environmental group. And what happens? A federal judge rejects that. So Trump has tapped someone who has the least credibility with that he needs to be effective in the district where where every single judge is inclined to view him skeptically, if not a threat to the rule of law.
And to be clear, he was a big advocate of the January 6 people, and now he has switched sides, which raises its own ethical concerns. But a man who defended the people who had an armed insurrection, who cheered Trump when he let these people out of prison, that's the guy who he's nominated. Well, guess what? Remember, I've been saying, watch Tom tell us, watch Tom tell us. Today, he said in the media, I'm concerned. That's Republican-ese for don't make me take the vote. Don't make me take the vote. Get me out of here. So the vote was postponed. It may never come back. He may never get back. But if he does, there is going to be a hue and cry. Jewish organizations are infuriated. An administration which makes such a big to-do about fighting anti-Semitism, chiding Harvard and using that as a club. What are they doing nominating this guy, Ed Martin? So you have to keep up the phone calls, the letters to senators. This is not a done deal yet. He could still be nominated. He has to stay off the agenda. Now, I really am having my allergies today. Another story just broke in the New York Times about Emile Bove. Now you say, that sounds like a familiar name. Well, he is the fella who directed the entire corrupt deal, as a federal court judge put it, in the Southern District of New York, where the Justice Department decided they were going to dismiss without prejudice the Eric Adams case so they can hold it over his head and get him to do Trump's bidding on immigration raids and law. Well, Emile Bove makes a reappearance in the New York Times story. What did he do, Adam?
Well, he was engineering, apparently, the entire strategy for going after students, student protesters for their free speech. As a matter of fact, this report from the New York Times comes on the heels of a lacerating ruling from a federal judge in Vermont who compared all of what's been going on with the going after green card holders for deportation. For their speech, he's compared that to the Red Scare, compared that to the Palmer raids, compared it to the most shameful moments in our history, and said that this time of excess also will pass. It's a beautiful ruling that we really reported in a lot of depth. That there's sometimes just, I'm sure you've talked about a number of times the Judge Wilkinson opinion in the Kilmar Abrego Garcia case. There's some pieces of judicial writing that speak to history. This is one of them, and I encourage people to read it because it takes the lens out and says, what is this First Amendment case about? It is about a panic in the name of security that is used to round up people and try to deport them.
Right. And what the New York Times reports is that Emile Bove was directing people in the Justice Department to look at the writings, at the First Amendment protected speech of people here on student visas and others, figure out which ones he didn't like so they could be deported. This is the most shameful abuse of power probably since the last time Emile Beauvais did something outrageous, which was the Eric
Mhm.
Adams account. This is a clear abuse of power. And moreover, it gives a lie to the argument, as Marco Rubio, our new slash both Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, says that somehow these people were dangerous, that they were harboring terrorists or supporting terrorists. That's nonsense. Beauvais was going after these people for their political views. You cannot do that. One of the things that judge in Vermont said was, if you are here on a visa, if you are a green card holder, if you are any kind of migrant and you are here in the United States, you have First Amendment rights. And this is the weaponization of government that the Republicans have been hollering about. You know who's been weaponizing it? Emile Beauvais. And he's using, of course, the cover of these people are terrorists, these people are bad people, these people have views we don't like. Well, that's not going to fly. And I suspect that that story and the facts that come out of it are going to come up in every single one of these cases. Because as you said, Adam, in that Vermont case, the judge clearly identified this guy is being rounded up and potentially deported because of his views. If that is true of every single one of these, all these cases are going to be dropped. And you know what? Emile Beauvais should be the subject, and he is already, of ethical inquiry, of ethical complaints. This is the most abuse I have ever seen from a single official in a Justice Department, really going back to Watergate and perhaps before then. Adam, have you ever heard of such a thing from the Justice Department? It's shocking in a way.
There's so many unusual and unprecedented things going on. I'll give you a small example. I've been covering the courts for 2 decades, and it's unusual to see anyone from Main Justice, from Washington, the main branch, travel up to the Southern District of New York to argue a case. Emile Beauvais, as you noted, did that in the Eric Adams case. There are other main justice officials going for the Alien Enemies Act case. They are dedicated to a kind of bizarre multitasking. You mentioned Marco Rubio. This is his third major position. Remember, he's in charge of U.S. aid too for some reason.
Yes,
Uh,
because they destroyed that, so they gave it to him. Exactly.
right. And Russ Vogt. And one more thing about Emile Beauvais, he used to be Trump's criminal defense attorney. Let's not forget this. When the Justice Department says, when Pam Bondi says that they are Trump's lawyers, she also means that literally. Now, the top officials, she used to represent him during the first impeachment. She was his impeachment attorney, Emile Beauvais being the criminal defense attorney. And same with Todd Blanche. And we're seeing them acting as arms of the president. That's unusual. And when that happened in Trump's first term, there were resignations. And you know what? When it's happening in Trump's second term, there are resignations. And
Yes,
we're hoping that that they will eventually be silenced. But that
exactly.
has not
And
happened.
we have, and this is the first story that ties the mass resignations we are seeing from the Justice Department to an action like this. And the good news is that there are lawyers who refuse to do this, and there are lawyers who have spoken up. The bad news is those are the people who are leaving, and he's stuck with the worst of the worst. But something you said about Main Justice, one of the tells for a federal court judge is when the U.S. district attorney, the U.S. Attorney rather, does not bring the case. Someone from Main Justice has to be sent because the U.S. attorney doesn't want to humiliate himself, doesn't want to do something that is unethical, untrue, unsustainable. So judges know, oh, here's a guy from Main Justice. This must be a stinker of a case or a stinker of an argument. And so the federal courts are onto them. And that, I think, is the through line that we are seeing. So when you wonder, are we winning? Are we losing? Is the rule of law under assault? Yes, yes, yes. We are winning a lot of these cases, but not all of them. And the difficulty is, Adam, that the Republican administration, Republican Congress, when they get a decision from a court, they say, well, what does facilitate mean? What is us? What is government? What? Every word they nitpick so that they evade the import of the courts. Guess what? The courts don't like that. And Adam, I don't know if you have any predictions or insight, but in these terribly, really disgraceful episodes of contemptuous behavior, do you think some judges are going to hand down some contempt rulings?
Well, we're already seeing Trump officials on the hot seat. Right now, there are depositions supposed to take place with ICE officials, DHS officials. They aren't being, this isn't a friendly conversation between friends. These are under oath conversations to see about their compliance with judicial rulings. I think Judge Boasberg is dead serious in his contempt inquiry. I think that Judge Zenas is dead serious about finding out whether her order is being complied with. And that's why she is ordering sworn testimony. That is not a game. And the way that the administration is acting, I would say that there is a strong probability of that escalating to findings of contempt.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even Judge Howell, in a case involving the Consumer Financial Protection Board, has lost patience with this court because they will say to the administration, you can't have a mass firing. This is a program set up by Congress. This is appropriated funds. So what do? They send people on administrative leave? No. That's the kind of evasive action that the courts are sick of. So, Adam, how would you characterize today's rulings? We have Ed Martin getting put off to the side. We have the ruling in Texas, and we have the story of Emile Beauvais. What does that tell you collectively about where we are on the rule of law?
I think that judges very clearly see the threat to the rule of law. It is unusual to see so many judges speak about the threat so starkly. I mentioned the Judge Wilkinson opinion earlier with the Kilmar Abrego Garcia case. He's talking about in very plain language, and this is a Reagan appointee,
Yes.
about the attempt to discredit the judiciary and why that attempt is not in Trump's best interest, because eventually the perception of lawlessness, as he put it, is going to essentially catch up with the administration, because that they lose their power if they lose legitimacy of a co-equal branch of government. So I think judges are seeing what's going on. They're putting it in a very strong historical perspective, as we saw with the Red Scare ruling, and in very alarmed language. We're seeing 9-0 rulings from the Supreme Court against the administration, 3-0 rulings from federal appeals court, judges using words like lawlessness to describe what's going on, and multiple judges, 4 by my count, have used that word. A 3-judge panel of an appellate court and the lower court using that word. The judiciary is seeing it, and it's why I always like to call attention to reading the language, reading the documents.
Yes.
They contain actionable information, and also a historical perspective and a perspective of what is going on right now. There's so much out there that leaves people feeling demoralized when you see the pushback from the judiciary, when you see the pushback that's going on in about 800 different May Day events as we speak. Globally.
1,000 even. 1,000.
1,000 now. Oh, outdated information. I remember at one time when Law Day of Action, the attorneys who are standing up in front of courthouses across the country, reaffirming their oaths to defend the Constitution. That was at 40. I think it's at 50 now. When you see in total the collective pushback, that it's there is a strong response to this authoritarian attempt, and people saying no.
And what I am so I couldn't have said it better, Adam. What I am so encouraged by is the variety of judges, geographically, politically, philosophically. We are seeing the judiciary step up. Now we just need the Congress to step up. The American people have stepped up. The courts have stepped up. We now have independent media like Adam, like the contrarians. But now we need Congress to get its act together. And you contrarians can contribute to that. You can keep going to town halls. You can write. You can call your representatives. And you can inform your fellow citizens where they can get good information. Adam is a fabulous source. We hope to be that for all of you at the Contrarian. Adam, thank you so much for joining us. It is a veritable feast of legal information these days. But so you're not underwhelmed, you're not overwhelmed, you're not confused, you're not distracted. You can always come here. We'll help explain it. We'll help break it down. And thanks to all of you, you're also helping to participate because, of course, the proceeds go to Norm Eisen, to other coalition members who are helping to litigate some of these cases. So thank you for joining us on virtually no notice. Over 5,000 of you have just hopped on. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Adam, thanks for jumping into the fray. And we will have more news tomorrow because the news does not stop. So thank you, contrarians. Have a great night.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure.